try to be better about, and I think this is one of the problems the police is having is that right now, someone gets affiliated with a church, or this is a 501c3, and I think, as Bill says, they're pretty good about obfuscating what's going on.
It's also not very well drafted currently. If you look at this, it says the permit will be issued by the chief of police. Based on what? There's no basis, there's no permit application, there's no fee, there's no, are they going to be fingerprinted or not? Because everybody's got to be treated exactly the same. So the chief can't be going, well, it's Thursday, I don't like the looks of this guy, they look a little thuggy. You got to be fingerprinted, and you got to pay me a $50. You know, this just isn't very well written. So if you're going to keep what we have, then let's go back and make it something that's more workable. And maybe, since this isn't, I mean, this is going to be a something that's done by somebody, and they're going to have to issue the permit. You might want to consider whether or not you want to impose a fee to do that.
So, are you willing to table this motion and have it come back at the next council meeting?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, can I have an agreement by the council?
Yes.
Everybody in favor?
Aye.
Thanks. Okay, the next item is the ones that were pulled, and that's item number 10. It was pulled by Elizabeth. You want to comment on that, Elizabeth?
Yes. So this is item number 10. It is the preliminary financial report for the 12 months ending June 30th, 2011, and it was presented by, prepared by our finance director, Louise Holt. I just wanted to pull it to bring it to everyone's attention because not everybody has the detailed agenda, and it just shows kind of where we ended up at the end of the year, at the end of a very, scary financial year. But maybe, Louise, would you like to give the report? Because our general fund revenue exceeded by $802,000. So we came through 2010 with more revenue than we expected, with higher property taxes of $200,000, $430,000 in higher building permit and plan check revenues. And then we had, because of our finance department and the good work of our building official, Dennis Lockley, found $155,000 of building deposits that were forfeited that is a one-time revenue source. And I just wanted to give you guys an attaboy on that. I'm just, really grateful that you guys are watching out and doing such a good job. So that's why I wanted to pull it.
Okay.
So I'm ready to make a motion to approve it.
Any other council comments?
The only comment I would have is, yes, it's wonderful, but we also have to remember that that doesn't include unpaid bills that have not yet come in. So that's
I was just talking about revenue. I wasn't talking about expenses.
Jerry? No. Bill? Any public comments? Okay, I will make a motion to approve item number 10.
Second.
All in favor?
I made the motion.
Now we go to number 11, which probably is not going to have much interest to most of the people here. That's a joke, by the way. So I will open up, and I would like to have John Danielson comment on this first before we start.
Well, obviously, this is the item we've received the most comment on, and being split between, I think, whether it is a well understood item or is it a punitive item, is it a tool, and it was my impression from direction from council that this would be something of the court of last resort for property owners that, after education, counseling, consulting with them to see whether or not there was that they might be eligible for free backyard pickup, that as a last resort, that we would have a tool to administratively cite cans that have been left out for extended periods of time, or even but few in town that refuse to take them at all. That is certainly what and I'll follow whatever council's direction on this is, of course. But I had assumed from the first time that that's the way that it would be implemented as an administrative citation after due diligence had been made through education and counseling, and maybe even trying to get neighbors to work together, as one council member suggested, helping one another for those folks, particularly on Mondays and Fridays, when it's the longest time period that is likely for a can to be left out. And I certainly would not endorse the citation of somebody who was 8 hours over or had to leave early the previous day and had to be out. I think your direction to me is that this is only to be used when all else fails, to bring the cans in. And that was our intent and my understanding.
Kathy?
Yeah, John and I spoke about this today, and I was the one who had talked about a neighbor helping a neighbor. Many of you are here because an email was circulated to you, and I think it was an unfortunate email because I think while it said a lot, I think it didn't tell you the whole picture. And people talk about some of the bad press Atherton gets, and that Atherton can take the bad press. But I think we've had enough bad press. I want to tell you what this proposed ordinance is not, because some of the comments didn't seem to understand what it is not. It's not a potentially money-making proposition. As a matter of fact, we would probably lose money as a consequence of it. It's a proposed ordinance for safety purposes. It's for safety of pedestrians, for safety of children on bikes, adults on bikes. It's, to a far lesser degree, it's a concern for visual blight. If you have a party or a wedding, you don't want 5, 10, sometimes 15 garbage cans out there. But most importantly, it's for safety, not in any way for money. That's not going to happen. It was not a council-initiated action. This is a consequence of lots and lots of people for long periods of time coming to us and saying, and even before Recology became involved, we had a lot of comments about, we up here are responsible for it. Well, you know what? This is still a democracy. And to the extent that we had hearings, everybody in this town could have attended those hearings and had a part in this decision. But this was something that a lot of people spoke with us about far before Recology came here and said that they were concerned about, as John said, people leaving cans out for long periods of time or forever. And that they were concerned about that. And it is as a consequence of that kind of concern and many, many emails that most of us, and I guess not all of us, have received, that we brought this to you. It's not cause for us to want you to pay more. As a matter of fact, some of you might end up with a solution. For those of you who are unable to bring your garbage to the front, maybe this is an opportunity for us to have, as Recology has said, they will help to inform people. And part of that would be to let people who are not able to bring their carts to the front know that there's an exemption. If you cannot, they will come to the back without charging you the additional fee to do so. So that could be an opportunity for you to become aware of this potential. And it's not meant to be, as John said, draconian or enforced by our police and their limited staff. It's not meant for the code enforcement officer, who would be the enforcing party, to go around every day and see who's left his or her garbage cans out. It's not meant for them to go around and ticket you all the time because you've left it out a few hours extra or over the weekend and it's there on Monday. This is after all the options have been explored. It's because we couldn't really use our nuisance capability. It's because it was a last resort. It's after all other mitigation has been explored. If you come in and say, I was away for the weekend, I put it out on Friday, they didn't come until late, I couldn't bring it in, they're not going to, code enforcement isn't going to want to pursue this. They have better things to do, we recognize that. And it's not just us. There are a number of other jurisdictions, large jurisdictions, such as Redwood City, that have this, and they've done it without any problems that I know of. Monte Cerrito, is it Cerrito or Sereno, I'm not sure. Sereno has had it for a long time without complications. There are at least half a dozen jurisdictions that have done this before we have. This isn't new without massive problems. But you know, if we are so insular that we don't know our neighbors well enough that they can't just back the garbage cans out of the right of way, we're not talking that they get behind your gates and hide them. We're talking about back them off of the right of way, the street, so that they do not impose impediments to people's safety. Maybe it's a good opportunity to get to know our neighbor enough so that we can say, hey, would you mind just pushing them in? And that's what this ordinance is about. And I think it is an opportunity to show a little goodwill for our fellow man, person, child, dog. And that's what is intended by this council.
Bill?
Well, it's similar to what Kathy said. I've gotten a lot of emails and I've responded to a lot. And again, to just reiterate, the way it has been structured and was discussed in the last couple meetings was that it would be an administrative fine if in fact it ever got to that point. And as an administrative fine, if somebody got one because there was a 3-day weekend, they had Monday pickup and they were out of town, all they need to do is give a call either to the code enforcement officer or to John, if it even got that far, and say, look, I was down, and we even discussed that specific example, that would be, obviously it would be waived. But again, the same as with our code enforcement today. If there's a problem and a neighbor either isn't comfortable talking to another neighbor or has, and it doesn't seem to get resolved, we have Mr. Cushing who can come out and he tries to resolve it by talking to people and trying to get it resolved that way without any issue. It's a last resort to say, look, if you can't move it, then there'll be some sort of fine. So there would have to be a history, and again, it just can't be something that's going to be overly repeated. I mean, every Monday you're not going to be, hey, I was on a 3-day weekend. But we'll work on that, and I think one of the suggestions that we also can speak with Recology about, although we're kind of set now on our routes, some of the streets had asked that maybe would it be possible if we change our route day, and obviously, when Mr. Carlson and I meet with them sometime next week, we can also bring that up if that's going to be an issue for a specific street or two, because that's some of the things that was in there. So again, I think that it was a safety item, and it's been requested by a lot of people. It's also a beautification item too for your neighborhood. So thank you.
Elizabeth?
Okay. So last month, the first reading of this ordinance was presented, and I read it, and I said, this is too much. Too fast. We haven't done a good enough job in reaching out to our residents 6 months into this new Recology garbage pickup service and helping them to understand kind of the guidelines that we're wanting. And to pass an ordinance, I hear the words of Councilmember McKeithen. They're very sweet and kind and gentle. I hear the words of Council Vice Mayor Widmer, who says this is not what we intend and everything. And then I read the words of the ordinance. The ordinance is one paragraph. It has none of those words in it. It's cut and dry, and it's to the point. It gives the town the authority to, first it sets out the requirements for each resident to do this and this and this, and 24 hours here, 24 hours there, and if you don't, then there is the ability of the town to enact the administrative citation process and the fees. So that's the next step. And of course, it sounds good that we will say, oh, well, yes, but we will be very lenient. all this. That's not what the ordinance is. I feel that we are going too fast, rushing headlong into creating more laws and more restrictions rather than being more neighborly and reaching out to our neighbors. I wrote, actually, I was prompted by receiving an email from a resident who is here tonight, and I'd like to hear them speak. When was it? It was earlier, it was on the 13th, last week. And I'm saying, you know, there are a lot of people in this town who do not know what's going on here. I was out with my husband, and I'm talking to him about this, and over the weekend, and he says, so if I weren't married to you and you weren't on council, I wouldn't know anything about this. How have the residents been informed about this proposed ordinance so that they can come and talk and express their feelings about it? And I said, well, I don't know, I guess it's posted on the website. You can log on to the Atherton website on Friday, the day of the weekend before the council meeting, and go through the agenda packet and read what's going to come up, and, you know, spend your weekend doing that. But there's no outreach. So after I received this email, I started thinking, so when was it? Yesterday, I sent out an email, and I just said to my little group of people that I know that I was sending the email because I wanted to make sure that they were aware of this proposed ordinance, which specifies regulated times that you may set out and bring in your garbage containers. And failing to adhere to these set times may result in a citation and a fine. I mean, then I attached the ordinance, I attached the administration citation and the fee schedule. So I also said we need to rethink the solution to this problem. I know we're unhappy with the new ecology garbage system, but passing this law just doesn't make sense because there are some residents who are physically unable to do it. Maybe they don't qualify for the free backyard pickup from ecology, or maybe they don't even realize that they can get that. We have it from a town, so I want to say our first step might be to have the town council, everybody, all of us signing our little name to a letter that goes out personally to the residents saying, you know, here's some of the guidelines that we want to adhere in the garbage container setting out and bringing in. And we want respect. We want you to be considerate of your neighborhood, the beautification of it, and do your best. If you cannot, you know, there's a hotline to call. In fact, in this month's, this summer Athertonian, there's a hotline to call if you have any, to the town, not to ecology, but to the town if you have problems with your garbage collection or any other complaints. And so we already have some of the system in place, and if we can take the proposed $20,000 a year that this, enforcing this new ordinance would cost, and maybe create a task force or create some volunteers to, in individual neighborhoods to be on call if you're going to be away, to pull that garbage bin off of the street and close to your gate, or if you have the ability to put it behind the fence. That's all I'm saying. Let's go one more step before enacting an ordinance.
Jerry?
And so, wait a minute, no, I'm not finished. Because then I sent this yesterday and I got 35 emails, and they're all in opposition to this. 35 just in a 24-hour period. And then there was one sitting on my desk right here that had signatures of about a dozen people saying, let's pause here, let's do something different rather than passing another law at this point in time.
You finished, Elizabeth?
Yes, sir, I am. Thank you.
Jerry?
Well, I've talked with John on several occasions about this, and it's my understanding the intent here is to really focus on what I'll call the deadbeats that don't have I'll call it a legitimate reason for not taking care of storing their bins. I've got one example that I'm aware of that they just don't take any action at all, and so their bins have been on the street continually for months. But I think the implementation of something like this is very, very important, and I've been stressing this with John, the implementation. And frankly, the email I got a copy of was, I think, mischaracterizes what John has earlier stated, where the email said it would be passing a punitive law to punish those residents who either are physically unable to take out containers or rely on their gardeners or other household help to take them out and bring in those containers, or go out of town for a long weekend. Now, I didn't hear you say that, John. I heard something different. So, you know, it's troubling to me that we have such a differing interpretation as to the way that this is going to be implemented. It's my understanding that the proposed ordinance was based upon what Pebble Beach has done. Is that correct? Did I get the right information? Now,
Pebble Beach and a number of other cities as well.
Now, I would guess that Pebble Beach has a lot of the same similar circumstances as Atherton has. It has residents that take vacations, and they probably have pickups on Mondays and Fridays, and maybe even kind of, can you give us any kind of a history or sort of explain how that was been able to work, or what hiccups have been with that particular ordinance?
Pebble Beach is similar, but not exact, in that Pebble Beach has a community services district that is in charge of garbage. And they do actively respond to citizen complaints. And generally what they do is they show up and they will, if the resident is home, they'll discuss with them the need to get the cans in and out, and all the options that are there. And their contract with the garbage franchise holder there requires them to bring the cans out to the street. If it's within 100 feet, they have to do it. If it's more than 100 feet, they will do it automatically if somebody has a physical limitation and can't bring it forward. And I don't believe I've ever heard of a citation being issued. I know that the Homeowners Association pressed very hard for this to go through, because it was, like here, there's no sidewalks, no curb gutters and sidewalks, and because of that, there were a lot of issues about pushing people out into the street, and sometimes, you know, for weeks on end. And so it has worked there quite well. I don't believe anybody's ever been cited, and I don't think the intent of this is to end up, certainly not a moneymaker, but I don't think that the intent is to cite anybody. I think the intent is to have another tool if somebody refuses to comply.
One of the things I asked John in our conversation was, is there anything currently in our code that it's my understanding that we'd like to have something in a code that would indicate that, or could be pointed to in event that we have someone downstream that, for whatever reason, refuses or doesn't want to comply, that you have something to point to. And John, is it correct that there's nothing in our code that we could point to right now that would take care of that?
That's correct.
Okay.
Finished?
For the moment, yes.
I would, you have something?
I just wanted to ask our attorney a question. The administration, is there any reason why we can't make the administrative part of this, our discussion that we've had right now, as to how we'd like to see the administrative part of the legislative history of this?
Nothing at all. I mean, it's pretty common for councils to weigh in on the intent of the legislation and why it's a good idea or a bad idea. And I think that's part of the message to staff, is how it will be implemented.
Yeah, so that even though the words are there, it's understood how we want it implemented.
Well, I would say that it was very interesting to me that in the last week or so I've had lots of emails on this, and until today I would say 70% of these emails were supportive of this ordinance. And then today, as a result of an email, I think, by one of our council members, which I felt was quite misleading, I got a lot of emails today totally opposed to it. Now, we, in our general plan, one of our duties is to keep this town as rural as we possibly can. I think everybody agrees with that. Having lots of trash cans out there that in some cases are there all week, people never take them in, is not doing what we're supposed to do. Many times in the past, I've suggested that if we decide to approve this ordinance, the first step we take is to write a letter to every resident asking them for voluntary compliance. And hopefully that might work. It might not, because at least in some cases, when people have gone to their neighbors and said, look, we don't really like to see all of your trash cans out here for a long period of time, we've had no response. This ordinance gives us the leverage, which we hope will never be needed, to keep our town safe and beautiful. And I think that, you know, as I say, I think some of the emails today were quite misleading. We're not here to make any money on it. We're not here to suddenly become a police state, as somebody has stated. We're here to try to keep the town as rural and beautiful as we possibly can. So I would say that, you know, as far as bringing in trash cans, one of the proposals I made a long time ago was that residents who were unable to bring the trash cans could get a certificate from their doctor, which then would force Recology to take the trash cans at least from the bag. I don't know about putting them in. And Recology said that they would only agree to that if they had a DMV disabled permit, but I think that's certainly something that we can certainly go back to Recology on that. Anyway, at this stage, I would now like to open this up to the public. Are there any public comments?
My name is Ann Santi Willis. I live at 98 Reservoir Road. I also happen to be an attorney in my spare time, or rather I should say my full time. I've actually read your ordinance, and I'm really happy to hear all of your comments. And Ms. McKeithen, I think it's great that you'd like to have this added to the legislative history. But I think that if you really, really want to make your residents feel a little better about this ordinance, you should actually add it to the ordinance specifically. That this is to be a last resort, that there are exceptions for folks that are out of town, that there is an exception for folks who are disabled and can't get the DMV permit that says that they get a disabled placard, so Recology won't go back to their homes and pick up their cans for them. You need to really do that, because as this ordinance reads, 24 hours, black and white, you get a ticket. And that's not right. As it reads, it's also not limited, if I recall, to just cans that are in the right-of-way. I don't put my cans in the right-of-way, they all sit on my driveway. But I would still be subject to a ticket if I'm out for a long weekend. And that's not appropriate. There's a lot more, and I spend a lot of time worrying about when I take out my cans, because I don't like to see them out in front of the house any more than anybody else does. I like to have them in the back of the house so they can't be seen. But there are times when I can't do it. And I don't have the time to call code enforcement and argue with them about whether or not I should have a ticket. We don't all sit at home with gardeners that can take out our cans and bring them in, and staff that can do that. Even those folks in our neighborhood who do have gardeners that take them out, can't have them come on weekends and do the gardening to do that. They are limited to having it done on Fridays. You need to accommodate that in the ordinance. It's not there now. You should send it back to be redrafted. City Council should certainly be able to do that. And I urge you to do that now. Maybe you've heard more in favor than opposed, but you've heard a lot of opposition. I know I've sent you 2 emails. My mother-in-law sent you a letter. My mother-in-law is 78-years-old, and she really abhors the sight of garbage cans, but she's opposed to this ordinance. Listen to your citizens. Thank you.
Any other public comment?
Steve Knox, I'm Walker. I sent each of you an email. I'd like to make just a couple of comments. The first thing is, I think you're a little ahead of the game trying to pass an ordinance on this. I was very pleased when I got Bill's sent me the ordinance and he sent me an explanation. I was very pleased that there was an education component in it. I would urge you to try the educated component first. And if it doesn't work, then you have a really good justification to pass an ordinance. Secondly, my question, I've heard the discussion about, and you mentioned it in your email, I've heard the discussion about there's nothing that covers it. I'm not a lawyer, so I won't ask for an opinion on this, but you've been talking about safety, which you didn't mention in your email. It seems to me that there's a safety component that would constitute a nuisance, and therefore you already have an ordinance on your books that can take care of that, so this ordinance will be superfluous. Thirdly, I think there's a lot of confusion on what you can do with the trash these days. We've got a new ecology, some bugs to work out, et cetera, et cetera. I think you ought to try the publication and education first. I know in my neighborhood, if they knew people were having trouble, if they knew people actually had trouble, our neighbors would stand up and bring people's cans in and out. Or, if they couldn't, they would at least know that there's an option to have ecology done it. And quite frankly, that's the first I've heard of it. Because I've never seen that publicized, and both Jamie and I read everything that's sent out pretty carefully. So, my advice is, why don't you try some publication and education? If it doesn't work, pass your ordinance, and then you will have the justification and data to pass a clean ordinance, because an ordinance that relies on opinion and discretion and all the rest is not a good ordinance. You never know when it can be enforced. So I'd really like you to reconsider what you're doing right now. Ecology said they paid for some of the education on this. Why don't you let them do that? And if there's still a problem, God bless you, pass the ordinance and have the enforcement officer come on. Thanks very much.
Any other public comment?
I didn't come here to talk about garbage control, but I'm here and I'm hearing this for the first time, and I have some comments about it, and I think I can appreciate what Councilmember Lewis said. The thing is, I have a neighbor, interesting enough, who leaves their garbage cans out all the time. The gardener comes on Monday, and we have garbage pickup on Friday, and the gardener wheels them out, fills them up, and they stay out there till Friday. But honestly, I would rather have no ordinance than to have some law that is so restrictive that it doesn't take into account what actually happens, and someone does something by accident. As a person, there are so many laws we have these days, and I always worry about breaking this law or breaking that law, and I think it's just really crazy that we have so many. And if we have to worry about fighting some guy, hey, you did this, you said you did exactly the wrong thing here, some administrative officer, he doesn't care, he just looks at, hey, you broke the letter of the law, that's it. That's all he worries about. So again, I would say, even though I have a neighbor who violates this thing all the time, I would rather have no ordinance than to have a bad ordinance that doesn't take into account people's fallibility in dealing with situations that they would normally have. Thank you very much.
Any other public comments?
Mayor Dobby, members of the council, I'm Gino Gasparini with Ecology, and I welcome all Atherton residents. I wasn't really prepared to comment tonight, but I do have some comments, and basically listening to everybody, I just kind of want to go over some of the things that I've been at and hearing at other councils, and this is just kind of an overview more than any specific comments. And absolutely right, these ordinances and many of the other jurisdictions that our service areas from Burlingame, East Palo Alto, so many of these ordinances, similar to this one right here, 24-hour restrictions and things of that nature, are currently in place and have been in place for years. I've been in this business for too many years that I care to remember. I don't know of any fine that's been issued in any of the other jurisdictions. That's just my personal knowledge, I don't know, I'm not obviously in the city town, so I don't know, but nothing
Please
is.
address the council, please address the council.
Oh, I'm sorry. And so I don't know of any fines that have been issued, nor have I known of anybody that's been approached by any of the code enforcements. However, these ordinances are in place. Most recently, I know the city of Belmont did enact this ordinance, again, for this purpose of getting carts off the street. And I think a lot of this really has come to the forefront because in past, it was always every other week service. And of course, now it's weekly service. So of course, you know, that doubles the look, if you will, of the carts. Personally, myself, in my neighborhood, I love to comment. I do help my neighbors, and we help each other when, in fact, carts need to be brought off the street, because we totally agree that, you know, we don't like them on the weekends, so it's no big deal for us to all work together. I love that comment. We do, in our contract for the city or the town of Atherton and all the other jurisdictions, Atherton is allowed to have an insert in our bills, and their bills are quarterly, so you can actually pen a specific comment specific to Atherton. Gina Simi is our public education manager. She's happy to work with someone in the town to address that issue, get it in the bills, and it will get out to everybody in the community. An interesting fact as well is I just got a call from a resident in St. Carlos asking me personally to help out with a neighbor that is in fact leaving the carts out. So if they're not going to town, you know, we certainly can take calls like that, and maybe we can get supervisory staff to get involved and help with issues as well. And then lastly, we do, as supervisors and on our tags, on our how to help you tags, we certainly have a box that can be checked. Please get your containers back in and off the streets in an appropriate time. So we do have all those things in place. So again, just comments. I thought it was necessary to bring that to everyone's attention. And